Good morning. Greetings from the Indian Academy of Neurology. We are here for the next edition of the talk show with the legends. So today we are with Dr. Professor Sanjay Singh, who does not require any formal introduction as such, but just for the sake, although it sounds cliche, but I would like to brief you regarding the accolades and the awards and various positions that Dr. Sanjay Singh sir holds. So he is the professor and chairman of the Department of Neurology at Creighton University School of Medicine. He is one of the youngest chairman of a neurology department in the Northern America. He was the founder director of the Nebraska Epilepsy Center. He served as a program director at the Creighton, Nebraska Joint Neurology Residency Program. During residency, during the PG fourth year, during his residency, Sir served also as a chief resident during his tenure. He, after completing his residency in the neurology, Sir completed 2 years fellowship training in epilepsy and electrophysiology. Sir has been author of many book chapters, many articles, and Sir has been a co-author of a book called Locatelli and Singh's Handbook of Neurology. Sir, any corrections?
No,
all
I
are
think
found from Google.
That's good enough.
Yes, sir. So as we are familiar with so many Indians who were born in India and settled in US from the field of technology, who have made it so big, like Sundar Pichai, like Satya Nadella, and most recently Pankaj Agrawal. And we know so much about them. We know their earlier years, their city of birth, their schooling years, their initial bachelor's degree, and when they shifted to USA and when they made it a big. However, from the field of medicine, we may be knowing so much about the technocrats, but from our own field, the legends from our own field, we may be knowing them so well, but we may not be knowing their life journey as such from the beginning. So this provides me with an opportunity to ask Professor Sanjay Singh sir regarding his journey. And as it's often said, "Safar khoobsurat hai manzil se bhi." It's the journey that matters and not the destination. We would like to know about the journey of sir from the beginning days. So if you, sir, can please throw us some light during your early years, during your early childhood years that most of us will not be familiar with.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me for this talk show. It's a pleasure. If I go back and start from the very beginning, as you wanted me to, I was born in Lucknow. And then I was fortunate to be born in a family where my father was a physician. My mother was a master's degree holder and also had a degree in foreign affairs. And so it was a very academically rich environment that I got to grow up in. I did my initial schooling in Prayagraj. That's where my father had moved as a physician in the medical college there. And then I spent some years in outside the country, as my father and the whole family had moved outside the country for a few years. And then I came back and did my high school in Lucknow, in St. Francis. And then moved to Prayagraj and did my intermediate from St. Joseph's College there. And then actually I went and did a year of psychology, political science, and economics, which I think was a great year for me to spend, because I think what happens is that in medicine, we're very fact-driven. And sometimes that fact-driven specialty, field, does not allow the opening of the mind, literally, where you begin to think independently and innovatively. And so that 1 year where I was in these fields of psychology and economics and political science, and I had great professors, and they sort of opened up my mind. And it was in psychology that I really decided that my destiny lies with the brain. And that's when that decision was, I guess, subconsciously taken by me. And then I went to MLN Medical College in Prayagraj. I must say it was a very amazing journey through medical school. Our library, when I look back and look at the libraries here in the United States of some of the universities that I've been part of was rather limited, But the good part was it had limited but good books. And so I still remember that when I was reading for my neurology, the only neurological exam book that was present in our medical school library was De Jong's neurological exam. And as most neurologists know, that is a very exhaustive text on neurological exam. But as a medical student, I had no idea because that was the only text, a book that was there in my library. So I read that book, thinking this is the basic text that everyone reads for neurological exam. And so it had great books, but only a very limited selection. So it's sort of, and I did most of my studying in the library. So all of those books served me very well. My professors, I learned from, all of them. And also from my fellow colleagues, my classmates, I learned a lot from them. And also from my juniors, because, they would ask us questions that kept us on our toes as we went through that. So I finished my medical school. My father was a very well-known ENT head and neck surgeon in India. And so, as you know, as is the culture, I was expected to sort of carry the torch forward, right? And become a ENT head and neck surgeon. I even joined an ENT residency first in Mumbai and then for a month, and then went back to Prayagraj and continued in ENT for a few more months. But it became clear to me that my real interest was in neurology. It was not in ENT. So then I decided to actually leave the country and come to the United States and do neurology here, where there would be no shadow of my father, where everyone is expecting you to do ENT head and neck. But even to this day, so that I don't disappoint my father, I give one lecture to ENT surgeons every year, whether it's on vertigo or headache or one of these watershed areas between neurology and ENT, so that I at least don't disappoint my father all the way through. And so after that's how I got to the United States. I was in New York and then did my residency in George Washington University in Washington, DC. That's where my interest in the cortex of the brain grew. And the one big disorder of the cortex of the brain was epilepsy. And then I decided to go to, Yale University School of Medicine to do my fellowship in epilepsy and clinical neurophysiology. And then from there, I moved to University of Nebraska and built the epilepsy center there. I became vice chairman there. And then from 2010, I've been chairman of neurology at Creighton University School of Medicine. And I think you're right in saying I was pretty young. I was around 40 years old when I became chair. And so I must say that destiny has been very kind to me. And I have been very fortunate in my life. I must say that I think I've gotten more than I deserve. But yes, such are the ways of destiny, that when it is kind to you, then you see success in most locations. So hopefully this gives you a brief idea of my journey through life so far.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very detailed as such and very insightful. Sir, like I read in your bio that you were valedictorian during your MBBS days. So there is always that one thing that keeps coming into our minds, whether like you were like studious throughout your early childhood days and during your undergraduation days, or you were like used to enjoy extracurricular activities and used to enjoy all of the sporting movies, etc. And despite despite doing all extracurricular activities, you are so much into the studies at the same time.
Yeah, I have to say, I wouldn't say I was really studious from the very beginning. I don't think I was studious till the very end either. I think I did fine in my school days. I was particularly interested in biology. I think that was pretty clear to me from the start. But yes, I used to play cricket and field hockey, quite a bit. Also table tennis. So I was into sports. I did all the things that everyone does. We went to movies. We listened to music. And I think, when I was in my class 12th, and then in the university, I used to bring out a periodical called Swaraj. So not many people know that was one part of activity that I was involved with. But yes, that periodical came out, and it was a very interesting experience, learning experience for me to bring out a periodical or a publication like that, at a relatively young age. So I was very inexperienced. I learned a lot, and I had good mentors who taught me, a little bit about how you bring out periodicals and what they should be about. So we did that. But yes, I was and have sort of bouncing in India and abroad and back to India. I think one of the things that you learn when you're outside of India is the real value of your country, of your motherland, and so that always stayed with me even when I was in India. This is a great land, a beautiful land of great people, and those great people that have traversed that land continue to inspire us, for a very long period of time.
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir, any role model during your undergraduation days, any professor or for that matter, any other non-medical person who was your role model during earlier years?
Yeah, I've always thought about that, and I can't really lay my finger on one person. Obviously, my father was a professor at the same medical school, so I can't say I can lay a finger. But I learned a lot from a number of people. I had people in different fields from whom I learned a lot. Like with some professor, I learned, how do you teach well in a concise manner. From another one, I learned how do you articulate your thoughts in a manner that appears to be clear and beautiful to people. With another one, I learned the words. From others, I learned their clinical acumen, the art of medicine that we say. So I've learned, something from everyone, and I have tremendous gratitude for all my professors who were there. From whom I learned different things to this day. When you go through medical school, you always remember your professors. That's something that I always tell people. And the other thing is, we did our medical school in India from government medical schools, colleges, and I still remember the total fee that I paid for my medical school was about, in terms of US dollars, was $10. That was my total fee. And I start out, when I teach my medical students here in the United States, I always start out by telling them what I paid for my medical school. Because as you know, in the United States, it's a little bit more expensive. So it can range anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 to do that. So, it's a debt we owe, because we pretty much taught for free. Yes, you qualified into an exam, but you were still taught for free in those areas.
Yes, sir. Very true. Very. It still holds true, sir, even in current times. The medical colleges fee in government institutes still it's like my time it was 6,000 rupees per year. So still like almost free education that government provides.
Yes.
Sir, any colleagues or friends you are still keeping in touch with from your UG days or still?
Yeah, from my medical school classmates, I still am in touch with a lot of them. They have all done really, really, really well. I think all of us have done better than we had ever thought we would do. So I have a colleague who's an orthopedic surgeon in UK. I have another one who's a child psychiatrist here. I have a vascular surgeon who lives in Bangalore in India. And so lots of my colleagues who, are like brothers almost, and I'm in touch with them. I'm in touch with my classmates. And nowadays you have social media, so you can be in a constant touch with them. Even though here in the United States, our malpractice insurance companies tell us not to be on social media. But I still keep in touch with my classmates on a very regular basis. So it sort of works out well from that. And I enjoy, there's nothing quite like having your friends from medical school. They're a special group of people that you can almost never, ever forget.
Very true, sir. Very true. And sir, when you decided to move to the United States, as you briefed us regarding from ENT years, early ENT years, in residency to the neurology residency. Can you provide us more details about the transition phase? Like cultural environment in India and US is very different. The medical college environment in India and US is very different. Overcoming those barriers, the transition phase, how you gelled up well with that system, how you learned the core values of the medical system over there.
Hmm. Yes, it is. It is different. It was even more different in those days because now I think in India the technology has grown immensely, and there are lots of facilities that exist in the United States that exist in India. In our days, it was so. I still remember even something like arterial blood gas analysis was only a theoretical concept in most places in India in those days. And here on day one, they put a bunch of arterial blood gas analysis in front of you, when you did that. My first rotation was in the ICU. Retrospectively, that might not have been the best rotation to take because it was baptism by fire, in here. But, you learn that there is this text that interns used to use in those days, which is the Washington Manual. And so the Washington Manual is very helpful. In those days, those are the days when I really remembered with gratitude my professors in medical school who would teach us all of these theoretical concepts because they were pretty practical when we came here. So yes, technologically, there was a huge difference, in terms of the management of patients was quite different. In those days, particularly, I'm not sure that it's that different today, but in those days it was very, very different. And we had to adapt quickly. But I think one of the things that our medical schools prepare us well for is to function in adversity, and so we can innovate and function. And I think my colleagues in my internship and residency were very, very helpful too. So I was very fortunate in my life to have great friends and great colleagues. And so all of them have contributed to my career. And so I'm immensely thankful to all of them as we have come through. Yes, coming to New York City or Washington, D.C. in those days was very different because there was no social media. Even phone calls were rare. And you could not even get Indian stuff here in the United States easily. The world has changed in the last 30 years, but in those days it was rare that you would get Indian things. Now, luckily in New York, it was much easier. Washington, D.C., it was less easy than New York, but we used to travel to New York to get Indian stuff, like Indian food and stuff that we used to, really miss. But yeah, it was a very interesting change. But at that age, you're excited by everything that is new and a challenge, and so you sort of get through it. And luck favors the brave, and destiny, as I said, was very kind to me. So things that we were taught in anatomy in my medical school, like the two heads of adductor magnus and stuff, those kinds of answers, sort of established amongst my professors that at least I wasn't totally dumb, that at least I knew a little bit of stuff. So again, I think the medical education we get in India is of very high quality. And I think that's what helps us when we go outside of the country to really be at par with places that are somewhat more difficult to do.
Yes, sir. Yes. And sir, if we ask most of the medical professional, they say the most memorable part of their journey in a medical profession was the residency, where all these colorful incidences takes place once in a while. So anything that you can, if you want to share some unique experiences or some memories that are very close to you.
Yeah,
During your
so I
residency.
can tell you because it was a different culture and it's a different country. It was quite interesting. And a couple of residents in those days came from India. They were Indians who were my colleagues. And one of them was very taken aback by just the cultural difference between the two countries, of how, just the way parents are treated by kids, by the way the kids are treated by parents. It's very, very different because as you know, in India, and I don't know today, but in those days, it was a very differential relationship between parents and children. And that's not how it is here in the United States. So I remember that in the first week, he must have come down from, he was on the 10th floor and I was on the 7th floor of the hospital. He would come down several times to tell me, oh my God, just see how they treat their parents and how they're talking to their parents. So over time, you obviously learn that it's not disrespect, it's just a difference in culture. But it is interesting. And, I was a single person, came here, my apartment friend that shared the apartment with me, we finally found that another Indian person, so two of us were there. The problem was none of us knew how to cook. So the only thing we ended up learning how to cook was rice, and then we'd get food from the outside and just eat that with rice. So it was a very interesting thing. But you become savvy in New York. You have to become savvy, and so you learn a few things, and that helps you not only in New York but also in DC and other places. So it was great fun. It was, now that I look back, it was a lot of learning in a very short period of time, because you have to be culturally competent. As you know, as a physician, you have to understand the culture of your patients. Otherwise, you would not be able to communicate with them properly. So I read a few books, of immigration of people in the last 200 years to the United States. And so you get to learn, when did the Germans come? When did the Irish come? When the Irish famine was there, the Irish migrated, and so on and so forth. And you see the different parts of the country that they went and established themselves and how they've grown from there. And the Indian American community here in the United States now is about over 3 million people. And so now it's become substantial. And I think it's only been around the last 20 to 25 years that population has grown substantially. Prior to that, it wasn't that many Indians. And yes, there were a significant number of physicians of Indian origin in those days.
And sir, as you were the chief resident during your final year of residency, was it common, or it must not be that common, for Indians to be the chief residents during the residency year? So that experience as a chief resident.
Yeah, no, it wasn't common. But yes, I had to learn quickly. And so one of the things that the chief resident does is make the call schedule, right? Which is rather controversial because people don't want to be on call. So when I was chief resident, the way I used to do it is I would leave the call schedule in the residence room, right, in the office. And I'd say, I want this filled out based on your conveniences by the 15th of the month. Because if it's not filled out by the 15th, then I will fill it out, right? And miraculously, it was always filled out by the 15th of the month. It also, as a chief resident, you sort of have to understand and sort of be supportive of your residents. And so we used to have a lot of fun. We used to have a happy hour where we used to take all the residents and on Friday evening, except for the one on call, and have some food and good times during that period. And the chief resident had to find resources to keep that going, So it was a good thing we started, and it was fun for the residents to be. My George Washington University is 2 blocks from White House. So when we joined the residency, an interesting, if you remember when President Reagan was shot, in the early 80s, President Reagan was brought to GW at George Washington University Hospital. So if they tell you during your orientation that if the president has a major medical issue, it is highly likely that he will show up at George Washington. And again, in those days, stroke was just coming into its own with some therapies. And so we were told that if the president has a stroke, it is likely that he might show up at George Washington University. And there used to be these drills where you would be told that, get prepared, the president's on his way. And you're always wishing that was only a trial. And he didn't actually show up in your ED with that. So it was a very interesting place because a lot of the, your patients would be people from either the federal government of the United States or embassies, or people who came from other countries to visit Washington, D.C. would end up being your patients. So it was a very interesting clientele of patients that we had. And you got to learn from a diverse cultures, that we had. We had patients from many different parts of the world during that period.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And sir, some insights into your fellowship year experience at Yale School of Medicine, epilepsy. As you
Yeah,
said, yes, sir. Yes.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Sir, as you said that the interest in epilepsy was, excuse me, the interest in epilepsy was from your earlier years of residency that you told us about. So you
Mhm.
decided regarding the doing fellowship in the epilepsy from the earlier years of neurology. Then get
Yeah. So, when I was a resident, my chairman was John Kelly. He was one of the big names in EMG and neuromuscular medicine. And so, Dr. Kelly had asked me whether I was interested in EMG neuromuscular. And, when you're in your first or second year of training, if your professor or your chair says this is, are you interested, that generally does interest you. And so it did. My epilepsy director was Sam Portalicchio, a very good epileptologist. And Dr. Portalicchio was from Yale. He trained at Yale. So he suggested that if you were interested, I would probably go to Yale for my training. And so I applied to Yale. I mean, as you know, Yale is clearly clearly one of the best institutes in the world. And for epilepsy, it was outstanding because you had the Spencers. Susan Spencer was the director of epilepsy. Dennis Spencer was the chair of neurosurgery and director of epilepsy surgery. You had Richard Mattson, who's the father of anti-epileptic drugs in the United States in those days. And you had earlier people like John Ebersole and Peter Williamson, who were big names in epilepsy. So it was a great place. I applied, I went and gave my interview. And, again, as I said, I was very fortunate. Destiny always was kind to me and I got selected. There were only 2 people selected, and you can imagine most people would like to go there. And so I went over. It was an amazing time. And, it was a tercentennial for Yale at that time. So 300 years of that university. Yale has produced more American presidents than any other university. So it was a great place, a great atmosphere. I enjoyed it a lot. Not only learned epilepsy and did neurology and taught students and residents, but also ventured to attend some of the talks by other luminaries of the field in different departments at Yale, which is an opportunity you get at a university like that. So, whether you have fractal mathematics, the founder of fractal mathematics would just give lectures. So I would go and attend his to learn about that. So it was a very interesting time at Yale. I think a very intellectually stimulating time at Yale. And my mentors, Susan Spencer, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, but was a great name in epilepsy, has always been, and Dennis Spencer. That was an unbeatable combination, husband-wife team. The wife being the epileptologist, her husband being the epilepsy neurosurgeon. And then Richard Mattson, the father of anti-epileptic drug therapies, drugs in this country. So it was a great experience. And then in addition to them, there were lots of people in research. So you had people who just did SPECT scan in epilepsy, or PET scan in epilepsy, or fMRI in epilepsy. You had a different person for each one of these fields. A neuroradiologist just read epilepsy scans, specialized in those areas. So it was a great learning experience. It was intellectually stimulating, and we formed bonds for a long time to come. So when I came to University of Nebraska and I started the Comprehensive Epilepsy Center, Susan Spencer and Dennis Spencer, who was at that time the dean of the Yale School of Medicine, came over to be present for that occasion. So, my mentors have always been very kind and helpful throughout my career, and helped me in when I had questions, throughout. Because every young neurologist, even whether you're young or not, really needs mentors. You need to have good mentors who you can rely on, who can give you good advice, who can sort of show you the way, and assist you in achieving your goals. And so those are the kinds of things that we look at.
yes, sir. Yes. And sir, as like we have bisected through your years of residency and fellowship, a little bit about your journey as a professional neurologist, professional epileptologist, and electrophysiologist.
Sure. So, when I came to University of Nebraska, as you know, in the United States, vast majority of medicine is in the corporate or private sector, right? Even the universities are private universities. So whether it's Yale or Harvard or Hopkins, they're all private universities now. And so when you're doing medicine in the United States, you also have to be financially viable when you're doing these kinds of things. So when I proposed that I was going to come there and build a comprehensive epilepsy center. They used to do some epilepsy here and there, but a comprehensive epilepsy center. I still remember the CEO of the hospital, said, Dr. Singh, do you have a business plan that you might share with us, about this? As you know, in medical colleges in India, we are not taught anything about business in any way, shape, or form. But I sort of took some time from him. I said, well, I'll get back to you on that. And I looked up the Yale Business School. And I said, who's going to give me a business plan? So I found a professor there. And I called him up and I said, he's junior enough. He's assistant professor. He might help me out. So I called him up and I said, I need to get a business plan together. And he said, oh yeah, in the summer, we have a whole course for 4 months on how to build business plans. And so you could probably come and attend that and that'll help you in your business plan. I said, I don't think you understand. I need it in 3 days. So I don't think I can go through a course for that. So he sort of laughed a little bit and he said, why don't you come on over? We'll sit down in the evening and then we'll see what we can do. So I went over. He was such a nice gentleman. He talked to me and he made the whole business plan. I sent it over and they said, oh, this is a remarkable business plan. Well, obviously, because the Yale Business School professor had made that business plan. So that's how I got started on my, they accepted it and they provided all the financial and other resources that I needed to build a comprehensive epilepsy center. And so that's how I got started. So again, you can see there was a good lucky break that we got through that. We were very fortunate. The University of Nebraska and their hospital was very, very supportive of what we did. So we built Level 4 Epilepsy Center, which is the highest national designation here. We used to get patients from 6 states here in the United States to come and see us during that. They still do at our current epilepsy center. And then I got interested also in the medical education, which was my passion because of teaching. And so I became program director of the residency program. Once I was doing that, and then I became vice chair of neurology. And then my chair, Pierre, sort of said that there's a position open for chair at a university in Illinois near Chicago. And he said, so I can nominate you because chairs can nominate people for that kind of position. You're not going to get it, but it'll be a good experience, So maybe 10, 15 years down the line, when you actually are a serious candidate, you'll probably. I said, sure, that's very nice of you, nominate me and I'll go and interview. I have to say, when I went to the first round of interviews, I can tell you every single person was more qualified than I was because they were much older than I was. But I qualified the first round, and then I qualified the second round, and they invited me for the third round. That's when my chair started getting a little concerned that this is going farther than it is. And then I finally got the letter of offer to be chair there. So I was going to go to Illinois to be chair, but Creighton University, which is here, the dean called me and we talked, and then I ended up being here at Creighton University as chair of neurology. So again, as I say, destiny was very kind to me, and I was not looking to be chair at that point in time, but I became chair. And it was a great break for a young person like me. It has been great fun because you get to, as chair, I think you get to help. So what I see as my role as chair is that I recruit really bright people and I support them and get out of the way so that they can build something big and then I can enjoy it. And so that's what I've done for the last 11 or so years. And it has been a great journey.
Very fascinating story, sir, indeed. And sir, as a chair of the department, or as a professional neurologist or epileptologist, our professors always say that as a neurologist, you have three duties to fulfill. One would be the clinical neurology. Second would be the academic neurology, where you teach students, MD students, MBBS students, and neurology residents. And third would be the research neurology. So, which three aspects among these three is very close to you? Which is your, like, if I ask you, which is your favorite amongst all these three?
So, we call that the triple threat here in the United States now. Clinical, research, education, three parts. What we have learned now in the United States, and as a chair, I can tell you, it's very, very difficult to do all three things really well,
Yes.
right? So now here in the United States, we either have clinician educators or clinician researchers, right? So one main and another thing with it, and then a third thing that you do some of, right? Because to be a master at all three was probably possible 40 years ago or 50 years ago. It's very difficult to be. Now, what do I enjoy? I enjoy teaching. My residents and students will tell you that I really enjoy teaching. I still teach first year medical students and third year and fourth year medical students, all of them. And I enjoy teaching residents. So teaching is really a passion. I love to see patients too, and I see just as many patients as any of my younger faculty does. I guess if you grow old, you get a ton of your patients, that come to you at the epilepsy center. The research part, yes. So in research, I divide it into these areas. So there's the clinical research, the clinical research that we do on patients and then drug trials and stuff like that. Then there is the translational piece, which is bringing bench research to bedside. And that's the part of research that I really enjoy. It's also what I like to do is to bring that bench research, because, the problem with medical research across the world is that you have people doing basic research and you have people doing clinical research. But to try and bring that basic lab research to the bedside of the patient, that is somewhat missing. So unless you have a pharmaceutical company or some company that does that, it becomes difficult. So I feel that translational piece, bringing the bench research to bedside. So one of the things is I collaborate with one of my colleagues who does a lot of research on how to prevent cells from dying with oxidative stress, which you get in stroke, you get in dementia, you get in aging, epilepsy, all of those. So I've, over the last 15, 20 years, collaborated with him. So now we test in a much more focused manner, like in epilepsy or in stroke or in dementia. He's found a new molecule that we are testing, which is called peroxididoxin 6. So we test that and we see how it prevents brain cells from dying under oxidative stress. So that kind of partnership is what I really enjoy in research. Education, I enjoy teaching in all parts, whether it is a medical school talk or whether it's a TEDx talk. I enjoy giving all of those. I don't know about the audience, whether they enjoy it or not, but I certainly enjoy giving that talk. So I must say that is certainly a passion.
And sir, as all of us are very familiar with your interests in epilepsy and the electrophysiology, but during our last conversation when you were in India, we had detailed discussion regarding the vascular neurology, and I got to know about your deep-seated interest in the vascular neurology as well. So, sir, which other subspecialties of clinical neurology besides epilepsy you are so deeply interested in?
So, the brain as a whole just fascinates me. I'm just fascinated by the brain and almost every aspect of it. I mean, I take neurology calls just as much as any of my faculty does, and so I treat strokes and but if you ask me, dementia, tremendously fascinating, because now with the new infusion drugs that are coming, one of them is approved by the FDA, a few others are on the anvil. This is going to be a huge field. So it's a very exciting time because we'll be able to help so many people with that. Parkinson's, is, all of these fields have their own unique beauty to them, like stroke is so mathematical. There's a vascular territory, there's localization, you get to your sort of answers. And now obviously you have catheter-based treatment. So like in our At our neurological institute, we have the interventional cath lab run by interventional neurologists and our residents participating in that. So, it's a very fascinating field. It's a life-altering thing. You take out the clot and the patient literally starts moving what they were not moving, or become more fully conscious, if it was something else. So a tremendous field, I think, tremendous advance. So fortunately in neurology, neuroscience, this is the era when neurology and clinical neuroscience is really developing leaps and bounds. We are learning about the brain in a way we have never done before. And I always say, today, in the coming years, we'll be able to alter human consciousness. We'll be able to alter human memories. We'll be able to make humans superhumans, all with the help of neurology. So this is the field. I might be a little biased, but this is the field to be in. This is the field of medicine, of science, that will change the way human beings will live in the future. I always say there are two edges of science. One is neuroscience, and the other is theoretical physics, right? About what is matter, what is existence, that kind of questions. And the part that really makes us human. So two edges of science, neuroscience and physics, which includes, astronomy and all of those areas. But these are the two edges of science. And in neurology today, you have the opportunity to stand at that edge of science and to go where no one has ever gone before. That kind of opportunity comes rarely in human history, and it is here today. And so people involved in neurology and neurosurgery and neuroscience are standing at that edge. We and you have the opportunity to go and discover things which will have profound impacts on humanity in times to come. That kind of opportunity comes very rarely in human history, but it presents to us today.
Yes. Sir, this little lecture regarding the neurosciences will provide a huge booster to all the medical students who will be in the dilemma regarding which specialties to choose.
Yeah. I might be a little biased, but I would say this is the field to be in. If you are interested in discovering and finding things that will change human existence, this is neuroscience and neurology is the field to be in. It is the edge of science. You get to stand at the edge of science. And because a human being lives in the brain, in their body, your memories, your happiness, your sadness, everything lives in your brain. Your brain literally makes you who you are, right? And so as we discover more about the brain, we discover more about ourselves. And so that's what is very exciting. If you look at our Indian texts, right, and you look at them, a lot of them talk a lot about this neuroscience. Because my interest is in human consciousness. If you look at the Mandukya Upanishad, right, it's a one-page Upanishad, but it talks only about consciousness, and it's fascinating. It talks about states of consciousness, and one state is obviously wakefulness. The second state, it says, is of dream, right? And the third is dreamless sleep. Can you imagine that thousands of years ago, they would have known that there is sleep and there's dream and there's dreamless sleep, right? So it's fascinating, even if we look back at our old Indian scriptures of how much thought must have gone into it. And sometimes it's fascinating how they would have known this. But clearly, neuroscience is the way to really go about even discovering some of that knowledge.
Yes, absolutely, sir. And sir, as I was doing my little research about what Dr. Sanjay Singh sir really is, I got to know about this, your deep-seated interest in the Upanishads, Vedas, the various Hindu rituals. And I was told that you lead the Vedantic Society of Nebraska. So if you can provide us.
Yeah, so, I started out because my interest in consciousness. We are trying to study different states of human consciousness, right? And so meditation becomes a part of that. Obviously, the problem is in the United States, you can't find master meditators, right? Because a lot of them live either in mostly in India, but also in Japan and other areas, and we don't have access to that in that. And so to study that, I studied scriptures of various countries, ancient scriptures. And then in that context, I studied the Upanishads. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on them. I study them from a neuroscience perspective. So something like the Mandukya Upanishad, where they talk about consciousness, is of much greater interest. Plus, I can understand that a little bit better than the other Upanishads. But I do. And I think I see a lot of fascinating parts to this, where you have like the number 108, in our scriptures, it says do this 108 times, 108 times. And if you study this, you find that 108 is a constant, right? So which is kind of fascinating, that if you look at the distance between the moon and the earth, it is 108 times the diameter of the moon. If you look at the distance between the sun and the earth, approximately, it's 108 times the diameter of the sun. So this heavenly cosmic constant being known thousands of years ago is kind of, and I used to live in Prayagraj, right? That's where I did my medical school, which is where you have the Kumbh, which is the largest congregation of humanity. Why does it come every 12 years? Because it says the cycle of Jupiter is every 12 years, right? And the Kumbh has been going on for at least 4,000 years or earlier, right? And so how would they have known the cycle of Jupiter around the sun is 12 years? And plus, why would you spend so much time trying to find that, So I find these things fascinating. Obviously, I'm a physician, but I'm also a person of science. And so these things interest me. And so I look at those things from that perspective.
And many of us in the India were not knowing about all these things about the Kumbh Mela and the science behind it. So a few years back, there was a Time magazine article regarding an Indian politician in which they used the caption "Divider in Chief." Now, when I knew about that IndoUS Friendship Summit in 2017 that you were at the center stage of, the caption that came to my mind was "Uniter in Chief." So you did a huge job. You did a great role in combining the politicians from across the India and United States. And there were key politicians from India that were part of it: Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Tarun Vijay, etc. So what went into your mind, when you were at the planning stage? What was the key idea behind organizing the summit, first of its kind in 2017?
Yeah, so you've done a lot of research. So yes, me and my colleagues here, obviously India is our motherland, and so we have great affection for it. And our current country of residence is United States, and so we have we wanted to really bring the two democracies, the world's two largest democracies, together, and really build a people-to-people relationship, because you have defense relationship, you have business relationship, but that people-to-people relationship where people of two largest democracies in the world get together, espouse our ideals, and then really inspire the rest of the world. Because in my opinion, the success of these two nations will determine the success of humanity as a whole, right? They are two of the most diverse nations in the world. They are two of the most democratic nations in the world. And so they represent, in my opinion, what is best in humanity, right? And so it was an attempt that we made. And, again, destiny was again kind, and we were able to get some noted speakers together, both from the United States and India. So we sort of did that, and it went quite well. It was attended in person, but also online, and so that's one of the things I do. Is I think there is this attempt to serve your motherland and to serve India as much as we can. So as you know, we do free medical camps in India. We have been doing them in Uttar Pradesh for a period of time. With the government of Uttar Pradesh, we've been doing that. We go into these different parts of the state, and we do 3-day medical camps. 2 days we see patients for free. We see about 1,500 to 2,000 patients. So it's a team of physicians from the United States that goes. And then the 3rd day we train local physicians, because we have to build capacity. We can see only so many patients, but if you can build capacity, then that becomes better. So We have been doing that. And it has been, very fulfilling. I think one of the most fulfilling parts of my life has been to go and serve. I think everyone should try it. Unless you try it, you do not know the pleasure and the happiness that that gives you, where you are serving without any expectation of return. And, my grandparents were both freedom fighters, so in India, and so they spent years in jail and led freedom movement in a part of India, and so they served to inspire, me in that role of service. Obviously, there's nothing, there's no comparison between what they did and what minuscule thing I do, but it always it taught me after I started to do this is you get so much satisfaction from doing this kind of work that it is actually more satisfying to you than to the patients that you serve. And everyone who has gone with me from the United States to do these free medical camps, everyone spends their own money to actually get there. Then locally I arrange things, but every single one of them is ready to go back again, to do this. So I would really recommend young physicians across our own country, India, that you should try this. Try and do these free camps or whatever kind of service that you can do. Free service with no expectation of return. The amount of happiness that you will get out of this is unparalleled. And so give it a try. If you don't like it, you can always give it up. But I say wherever you are, whatever you can do, try and do some free service and dedicate yourself a little bit to that. It will give you immense happiness. It has given me immense happiness and satisfaction. I'm forever grateful that I was allowed to do this, and that it has been looked at favorably.
Sir, even I was lucky enough to attend so many of free rural epilepsy camp along with Dr. Nirmal Surya as a part of National Health Mission in accordance with the government of Maharashtra. And even sir, not just me, many of the young neurologists would love to be part of your free medical camps in the future in the Uttar Pradesh. We would love to be part of this.
Yeah, so Dr. Surya is such a good example of doing this. And then, so what we have now decided is that through INA, that is the Association of Indian Neurologists in America, and Indian Academy of Neurology, we will together work to identify 4 different states in 4 parts of India, and together, sort of perform these free medical camps on the model that we have done at Uttar Pradesh, where you do 2 days of free seeing patients for free, and then the 3rd day you train local physicians and do this all for free. So we are in the process of identifying 4 states in India where we would do this. We wanted north, south, east, west, so that it will be at least fairly distributed across the country. And then we hope to increase the number of states so that people go, because the number of neurologists of Indian origin in America, having been president of INA, I can tell you the numbers are pretty comparable to the number of total neurologists in India. So that's why this partnership, for which I have to thank the Indian Academy of Neurology and its leadership, both the past leadership and the current leadership, and the leadership that is coming with Dr. Surya and Dr. Gagandeep. And so they have been very collaborative, and we hope to start this. And I think it will sort of benefit a lot of the younger neurologists in both countries because they can come together and serve, together. And I think that will build bonds that will remain for a long time to come, and will facilitate relationships between the neurologists of the 2 countries, and also that can build up both in education, research, and clinical fields together.
Yes. Now, as we are done with the heavy part, now for the last session, we'll be talking about the few lighter aspects of your personal life, sir. Sure. So whenever, sir, you are not practicing neurology, what would be the typical day, holiday in the life of Dr. Sanjay Singh looks like?
So I spend time with my family. I have a daughter. Now she's obviously what we would call the university. So she's, at that. But prior to that, I used to love spending time with her and my wife. and a number of friends. So you'd be surprised at the number of Indian Americans that are here. So I spend time there. I try, and I'm also the third substitute teacher at the Sunday school at the temple. So when they can't find anyone good, then I have to go and teach. So I do that sometimes. Some of my extracurricular activities are, trying to bring the United States and India together and closer. And so we either organize events like that, or we talk to legislators here and explain to them the value, the great value that India brings to the world. And so some of my time goes in that. The thing that I really love to do is read, and I'm still an old-fashioned book reader, so I'm not a Kindle reader, as my daughter always makes fun of me that I still have books, and you can see some behind me. So I still love to read an actual book, and I have never been able to read a fiction book, which has been something I would have loved to do, but I'm never able to read it. So I read nonfiction, but it's something that helps me explore new vistas in life while sitting in my study or in my office or in my bedroom, and I can do that. So those are some of the things that I really love to do. I still very recently I used to play cricket, with some regularity here. But now it's become less often, especially with the COVID times. Everything has changed, so you have to be more careful about things. But hopefully, this Omicron wave is dying down, and hopefully, we'll finally be nearing the end of this pandemic.
So do you still follow Indian cricket and Indian politics on regular basis, or once in a while?
I would say in cricket, yes. I wouldn't, as much as I can. I must say. There was a period of about 10, 15 years when I couldn't, because in those days in the United States, you didn't get any cricket. So there was no way of following. But now, over the last 10, 12 years, I've started to follow it again. And I must say, the cricketers we have now are pretty good, pretty talented, so we did good at. In our times, the cricket, the biggest thing was the 1983 World Cup that we won. And so I recently watched the movie that was made on that 1983. And it brought back memories, because we have first-hand memories of what we were doing during that. And players like Kapil Dev, who were, really stars of Indian cricket in those days. So it was something that I think everyone of my generation can never forget. It was one of those moments where you remember what you were doing when India won the World Cup for the first time in '83. So, I do follow Indian cricket. Indian politics, probably less, because they don't cover it much here in the United States, But yes, my family in India is involved in politics, some of my extended family. So there is, I do keep in touch with them. So I get some information. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I always enjoy every now and then when you get some information.
Uttar Pradesh and Lucknow in particular are very famous for its street food. So do you miss any of the street foods?
Yeah, I do. Whenever I go to Lucknow or whichever city in India I go to, I must say one of the great highlights of going to India is great food. I mean, we have Indian restaurants here in our city. We have about, I think, 15 or 20 Indian restaurants now. But I still miss Indian food in India. There's nothing quite like it. The flavors and everything. It's something that I think most Indian Americans miss, is good Indian food in India. I still, it has been so many years, but every time I go back and I go to India, it is such an exciting feeling. I can never get over that feeling. And so I think a small part of that is also the food that is there. Obviously, your loved ones who are there that you're going to see, and your friends and everyone. But food is certainly a big part of that. Yeah.
So your favorite cuisine stays Indian, or it stays American after 30 years,
No.
maybe 25, 30 years in US?
Even in America now, whenever I go to any other city, I find the Indian restaurants where I'm going to eat it. So it is by far my favorite cuisine. Yes.
So in the last part, we would like to what would be your suggestions or what would be your tips to the budding neurologist, not just in India, but all across the globe? What would be your tips? Like people keep on saying that the training in neurology, or for that matter, training in medicine, is substantially going down. Means, previous clinicians used to be hardcore clinicians bedside. And with the advent of the newer and newer technologies, MRI, electrophysiology, the focus is more on investigational neurology rather than the clinical neurology. So what is a tip that you would like to give to the growing neurologists like us?
Yeah. So what I would say is, what I tell my residents here and my younger colleagues over here, there is no substitute to clinical medicine. No matter how much technology you have, the clinical medicine, your eliciting clinical science, that knowledge base is very essential for any young and budding neurologist. And I always tell neurologists, like I've said before, you have the opportunity today to stand at the edge of science, right? Take this very seriously. There are not many people who have that opportunity to stand at the edge of science and discover new knowledge, right? So be always interested in that if you're in neurology and neuroscience. When you are getting trained, take that training very seriously. You will learn from every professor, I must say. You may learn some good things or some things that you don't want to do, but you will learn from every professor that is going to be teaching you. So have that attitude that I'm here to learn and they are here to teach me and I'm going to learn from them. Because if you don't have respect for your teachers, you will not learn from them, right? And the teacher may not lose much, but you will lose quite a bit. So learn clinical medicine. When you get an opportunity to learn from a senior professor, sort of spend time and learn from that. You will never get that opportunity again. I always tell people to read diligently. Some of your texts you must read diligently. Prepare yourself, because on you in the coming years will depend people's lives. And that is a rare privilege that is afforded to us, where we have the opportunity to help people at their very vulnerable period, when they are sick, when they need help. And so we must take that seriously. And therefore, our education we must prepare ourselves for that moment when you will have to take those decisions. And so I tell young budding neurologists, prepare yourself clinically and from an academic perspective, but never forget that you're standing at the edge of science. You have that opportunity today to get new knowledge that will change humanity in years to come, right? How many fields in medicine can tell you that you can change human consciousness, right? You switch on and switch off oscillating frequencies, and you can switch a person from being conscious to unconscious, right? Where you can modulate human capabilities. These are things that within the next 5 to 10 to 15 years will become a reality. This will place neuroscience and neurology as the field that will change medicine, science, and humanity. And you have the opportunity to be that. It is a rare privilege afforded to you. It's a very exciting time, much more exciting time for your generation than it was probably for us. And so imbibe that excitement and help and use it to stimulate yourself to become a great neurologist, because each and every one of you has that potential.
It was a very beautiful message from the sir to all the budding neurologists and all young neurologists who have just cleared their exam and just being part of the mainstream clinical neurology. So on the closing note, I would like to thank you for your time, for answering so many of our questions in detail. And I genuinely hope that this conversation would have provided so much more detailed insights into what Dr. Professor Sanjay Singh really is. Thank you so much for your time. And sir, it's very commendable that the kind of the efforts that you've been making despite your busy schedule in connecting the Indian and United States diaspora of medical fraternity and neurological fraternity. And it's, as it's said, that one person can, it starts with one person and it keeps on putting in efforts, and the team that is being built over the period of years will do huge service to the, not just to the Indian people, but all across the mankind. And last few lines from Mazhur Sultanpuri ji that I would like to dedicate to you. मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल, मगर लोग जुड़ते गए, कारवां बनता गया. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mel.